very nice to meet you. My name is Matt Hatch. I run a live call and talk show all about the Wheel of Time, and love being here talking to you about your work on season three. I know in previous interviews I've watched, you've talked about the people, places, things about the Wheel of Time with what I would call ease, comfort. What was your introduction to the Wheel of Time? I've never heard that.
My introduction to the Wheel of Time was through a conversation with Rafe and a discussion while I was in New Zealand during COVID, and we had a discussion about me coming on to work on season two, and it went well, I think. And then I furiously started to read the books, and I haven't stopped since, really. And I felt utterly overwhelmed by the scale and scope of it. It felt like a huge, huge undertaking. And that was just, trying to catch up with the first two books, then the first three books by the time I got to Prague. So it was like a huge catch-up lesson, like cribbing for an exam, like trying to read really quickly through everything and get on top of everything. And then we started season two in COVID, still in the COVID setting, so testing every morning and full masks everywhere, and then meeting the cast one by one. And the first person I met was Yosha, strangely. And here we are now, having done episode 4. That seems to be circular. That's like a past life or something.
Yeah.
So that was my introduction to it. Yeah. And then in the gap afterwards, when the show was being put together in London, I met with Rafe and had coffee, and he mentioned episode 4 that he had written, and I had not yet started The Shadow Rising because I don't read ahead of where we are. I don't want to know into the future where beyond the show, so I read where we are and I stop where we stop, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I got that trick off Zoe Robbins, and I think that's a really good way of doing it. I know other people have gone right to the end, and so they should, but I don't do that.
Yeah.
And I read The Shadow Rising and was absolutely terrified of The Road to the Spear. I was so bamboozled by it. I found it so dense and full of lore and going backwards and going forwards and going backwards. And so I was working on a film in Paris, and I started to travel to Prague 2 months before I was supposed to be there, just so I could have pre-briefings with Rafe and Andre, and then I would go back to Prague and carry on my edit, because I just felt like my brain was exploding trying to understand what we were taking on.
Yeah.
Because all of it was outside of the Wheel of Time. None of it was set up. There was nothing in existence. Ruidian didn't exist. And so I got stuck in early and started to have conversations with Rafe and Andre, and then went back and then came back again. I think I came back 3 times to Prague just to kind of try to get ahead of it before I started.
I mean, as a fan of the material for decades, I can appreciate the daunting nature of just reading that for the first time and thinking you're going to direct it and bring it to the screen. I mean, there's a culminating aspect to it that we get even in the show. In the show, season 1, Rand hears Tam Althor, his father, talk about this baby he found in a mountain, right? And then there's this moment, right, where in this episode you now meet and Rand meets, in this case, right, his mother and father there, right? He sees them, and I can imagine trying to, like, close that loop and bring kind of meaning and understanding to it. It was quite the challenge. So I'm curious, like, like, what were your driving thoughts? Like, you came back and forth 3 times. What were your thoughts, and how do they coalesce to kind of what you wanted to try to explore in this episode?
I mean, I think the characters themselves are all stepping stones in a trial themselves. You know, the kind of the journey of literally the journey of Avendesora, which, you know, begins actually, you know, right at the end of the story coming backwards. That's a kind of huge part of the story, as in seeing that's how you understand it's going backwards, because the tree is getting bigger and bigger through the story going backwards.
Yeah.
But for me, I think it's about faith, because I think the Aiel faith, I think this may be like, you know, off to the left slightly, but I feel like the Aiel up until this point have been this terrifying warrior ninja race who we don't really understand them particularly well. They have lots of codes about the way what is and isn't acceptable. Like, they're very code driven. And I love the way they talk and the hand talk, and I love all the kind of the different things that we've seen so far in the show. But when episode, you know, the road to the spear is the moment that Rand gets to experience the journey of that entire faith, like where it comes, how it begins as servants to the Aes Sedai, and then how that gets drawn out through the whole 3,000-year journey that we go on in those time slices. It's like a sort of immense kind of history lesson.
Yeah.
And so the Janduin one, going back to your question, is, for me, allows the audience to understand 2 key things. A, we're going backwards. You don't understand that necessarily until he says my father, my mother at the end, but you understand that we're going backwards. He is within, his lineage is definitely within the Aiel culture, but he gets to see his own birth, which is like, you know, his mother's death, and he gets to see it, and that, you know, the absolute trial of Ruidian, you know, the fact that Ruidian takes you to the edge of your capabilities, it will kill you if you aren't strong enough for it.
Yeah.
That first piece, that first kind of flicker, joining it together with his hands in the snow, that has to convey in 2.5 minutes the absolute brutality of the experience he's about to have. Like, it's going to be absolutely remorseless. So I think, you know, that's what it was about. I think that, you know, it's also for Yasha, it was a chance to really kind of expand or show what he's capable of, and to play these different characters. That's the first one you're going to play as your father in mid-battle, you know? Going through absolute trauma, and so yeah, welcome to Ruidian, you know.
I was going to say, I just want you to know, I've been thinking about these books a lot, talking about them a lot of my life, and you framed the story about Avendesora, and I don't know that I've ever kind of walked it back like that about Avendesora itself, and that's gonna sit with me after this. I just one last question. I you know, we have this has been awesome to speak with you, but I know we have some limited time here. One last note, and fans noticed this immediately, and this is what we see, right, was some homages, right? Lord of the Rings, the Hobbits. I saw fans in chat immediately saying when they saw Lewin, they're like, these are the Hobbits, you know. There's like there was a feeling of other homages during the, you know, I feel like I recognize a little Dune in there, right? Were these intentional for you? Were you trying to kind of like connect?
No, I don't think so.
Story? Okay.
I mean, I think we're all made up of our influences. So I am, you know, a huge fan of Lord of the Rings, and I live in New Zealand as well, which is kind of, you know, very hobbity. Even when you go into the airport at Wellington, there's a dragon, you know. I don't think we were consciously trying to pay homage to that world, but I think the Tinkers and the Lewin story in particular is that moment where we split, that is the split, in fact, between the Tuatan and the Aiel. That's the first moment. So that contrast, but showing the peaceful travelers and the first break. Lewin is that's that first break. So I think we just wanted to make it feel like, to make it feel kind of lovely without it being, through a proscenium arch. The idea that there's this sort of beatific culture, gentle beatific culture that follow the way of the leaf, and then this is the first kind of fracture where someone is expelled through violence, and then they become that first kind of veiled version of the Aiel. So and June, I think Robert Jordan probably was influenced a little bit by the June books. I think we have our own take on it with the Aiel, and I think Sharon Gillan would speak in depth about the choices in terms of costume and how she developed the different feels of the tribes. So the Shido, and the Tardad, the contrast between the different warrior tribes, and also historically how they've changed from Mandain through to Janduin. The Janduin look is this kind of very kind of ribboned, kind of bound look, and then going back to Mandain where it's quite heavy and cloaks and almost like Viking looks. There's a huge range of feels to the Aiel, and I have to say that to me I felt quite honoured to be part of those discussions and to be working out how to show the history and unpack the journey of those characters. It felt very daunting at first, like actually quite scary. But the process of working on it with such great people like Davina and Sharon and Andre and Rafe and Jan Petrina and all the people that kind of bring it together as a team. It was really, really an honor actually to do that.
I just want you to know it was truly extraordinary television. That's what it feels like watching it and speaking to fans. So thank you very much for taking this time and chatting with us. Passed by too quickly, but I loved hearing your insights on the process.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you for your work as well. I do follow what you guys do, and I appreciate you as well. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Thomas. Okay, we'll talk to you soon, hopefully. Okay.
Thanks,
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.